Students call me Lama Linda, and I lead a Vajrayana Buddhist Sangha called Awakened in Toronto. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about stages of being and states of mind. Some of you may recognize these phrases from Ken Wilber. He created these phrases as he described integral spirituality many years ago. And if you read anything by Ken Wilber, you'll learn there's lots of charts, many colors, and he describes these two parts, the stages and the states, into two distinct components. The stages of being is briefly described as everyday life. It's your interpersonal communication, and it is the self in the world. States of mind, on the other hand, is the spiritual life. It's awakening or spiritual realizations. Now, if you opened an integral spirituality booklet or looked at a YouTube or something, you'll notice really quickly that there's lots of charts. It's very colorful. There are rows of columns of different comparative ways to categorize various stages of all different things. And there's a lot to be learned from this, but I have to say it gets a little heady and a little hard to understand. And I've been following Qapel, Doug Duncan, as my root guru for more than 30 years. And truly, he's been teaching about integral spirituality for all that time. And much like the ancient scriptures had commentators that really describe it in very easy to understand terms, Qapel does that. He really breaks it down into simple ways of understanding what's meant by stages and states. And I'm going to do my best today to tell you how I understand states and stages and how they really make a difference in how I see the world, what standards I hold myself to, and perhaps another way of understanding teachers and other great leaders and the importance of being balanced. So I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit more about what stages of being is. So stages of being is what I often think of as my therapy side. So many of you know that I'm a psychotherapist as well as a Buddhist meditation teacher. And the stages are really connected to what I do in therapy, what people can learn, the potential of what Western society has contributed to understanding the mind, understanding personal development. When one does stages of being, one basically learns how to build a strong ego. This is actually a really important thing. It's very necessary. And before one gets very far on the spiritual path, one must have a very strong ego. From there, one can transform. But one must first build the strong ego. And one does that through building and increasing the stages of being. When one has a strong ego, one can stand up for oneself. One can have better communication with others. Makes one much easier to be in the world. You get along with people. Whether there's similarities or differences, you can actually get along, figure out a way to get along with people, to speak clearly, speak your mind, respect others, and it allows you to be friendly without any great disturbance. It's not an either or between it respecting the self and other. It's about doing both. So when one has a high stage of being, one respects the individual. That's why one stands up for oneself. One has a high sense of self, what we often call a strong ego. And one also respects others and allows them to be in the world and allows them to have their own views and their own opinions. Now, if one has a strong sense of self, one will naturally also be able to set goals for oneself, have discipline, apply that discipline, have energy, and just generally be able to achieve their goals in a very functional kind of way. Another part of this is being a being, showing up in the world as a balanced being, being able to access yellow energy, what might be called feminine energy, and also being able to access green energy, what might be called masculine energy. And the individual that has a high stage of being is able to access either collection of qualities at will, depending on what the situation needs. One isn't limited by their gender. One isn't limited by how they appear on the outside, but rather they are balanced, they are confident, and they are able to appear as needed. They're very flexible, and they're able to show up according to what's needed in the world. That means that they're able to take on different roles. They may be teachers, they may be students, they may be leaders, they may be followers. They're able to really see what's needed and offer that to the world. And when they do that, their contribution is quite high. They are desired in sanghas and communities and groups because they're able to actually manage themselves and able to contribute. It's very easy for someone at a high stage of being to figure out how to contribute and how to pitch in and how to help out. And others are happy to be with them and to also help out. There's not a lot of drama. There's not a lot of emotional energy that is wasted at, fighting one's battles, fighting one's demons, fighting with others. And instead, the person who is at a high stage is able to show much tolerance, much clarity of mind, being decisive, being able to act when something is needed, either for themselves or for someone else. And as a result of this efficient way of living, there is a lot of time left over, a lot of energy, and a lot of opportunity to have a life of service, to be of service to others, to contribute in a wide variety of ways depending on your talents, but nonetheless to find a way to just show up and fit in and give your best foot forward in terms of being able to contribute, not being held back in any kind of way. Sounds kind of ideal, doesn't it? We all would want that. And at the same time, there is the states of mind. And the states of mind is actually something that is usually sort of reserved for the aspiration of spiritual seekers. They may have realizations that are in a sort of predictable format as recognized by someone of higher spiritual attainment. And traditionally, at least in the Buddhist way of mind, there are designated stages of the states, if that makes sense. So in Theravada Buddhism, there are 4 particular stages, and a realized being is recognized on these stages of their states. It gets a little confusing going back and forth, but there are 4 of these levels, perhaps is a better way to describe it. In Vajrayana Buddhism, there are actually 10 levels, and a being not only achieves a high level for their own sake, but then they also become teachers and sharing it in different ways, and in such a manner they attain even higher levels. Now, in this way, states are different from stages in that stages, someone can actually go up and down through the stages, and depending on what's happening in their life, they may actually regress and go back to some lower stages at different points in their life when things are tough, when there's losses and things like that. But with states, when one attains a high state, a realization, one can never go back down again. So the states are really highly fought. And when one attains a state, it's quite an accomplishment, quite an achievement, because it is a state that cannot, you can't fall back again. You maintain that level or wait for the next for the next state. Now, let me be clear that Buddhism is not the only path to states of mind. And there are many other religions, parts of religions, other spiritualities, even non-religion like atheism, people who practice that could actually attain a high state of mind. It's probably less likely. It's sort of like, why would you attain something that you haven't even been working towards? It's getting a goal that you haven't actually been pointed towards. So the majority of beings that have attained high states tend to be Buddhist, but just to be clear, there's nothing exclusive about it. There may be other beings that aspire to spirituality and somehow, without a clear path, nonetheless attain high states of realization. And what's important to know is these states are actually recognizable by other beings of equally or higher states. And these realizations are measurable at the physiological cellular level. It can be measured, lately these have been measured on MRIs. You can see the effect on different kinds of scans, because the body actually changes with a high state of mind. So as one attains higher and higher states of mind, the physiology of the body changes as well. And it's not just an outside person sort of, guessing at whether these states have been attained or not. Now, you may be asking yourself, what's more important? Do I want to, worry about stages? Shall I concern myself with stages? Is states more important? And what I want to tell you is they're both extremely important. And Buddhism has traditionally emphasized states of mind. There are lots and lots of Buddhist meditation practices where one practices raising the states. And that is still important and will always be. But as some of the recent scandals in Buddhism have shown us, we need to also balance our emphasis on states with the emphasis on stages of mind, and they work together. So some of you may have heard the unfortunate news about various Buddhist teachers in recent past, that have had scandals of abuse, sexual, physical, power abuse, emotional abuse. You've also heard about issues with drugs and alcohol, and literally mistakes made at the stages level. And any of these kind of allegations actually fall under stages. They are about high lamas, high teachers that are fully realized beings, have extremely high states of mind, and yet they have not emphasized the learning of stages, and they've not necessarily been in the world. Sometimes it's a cross-cultural issue. Sometimes it's a monastic coming out into a householder and being around temptation, being around other people, and being around being put into situations where simply they're in over their head and they don't know how to act. And so it's not advantageous to only operate on one side or the other. The best thing we can do is actually create balance. Just as we practice creating balance between yellow and green energies in the being, we also want to emphasize creating balance between states of mind and stages of being, and ideally to attain high levels on both sides. We know certainly that when there's cross-cultural movement, we are more susceptible. We're vulnerable to misunderstandings. And if we don't have a trauma-informed lens on, we may criticize and blame people for not understanding and making good decisions. And really what we're seeing is that it is possible to have a high state of mind, high state of realization, an awakened being, a tulku, a rinpoche, any of these really auspicious names, and yet to have a low stage at the human interactive everyday life kind of way. So ideally, all great beings would be aware of these two components, and they would match their levels. So as their realizations of states of mind rises, They would also ensure that they're having adequate therapy and adequate interaction with everyday people in such a way that they are creating a balanced being, one that is able to live in the world at a, and communicating and interacting with others here and now. And they also are able to maintain their high states of mind from spiritual realizations. And if there is a manifesting of love, there we can ensure that love will actually carry over between the two sides, between states and stages, and making sure that manifesting love will allow beings to contribute the most to the planet. And this is this being's personal aspiration for all beings.